John Donne was born in London in 1572 to a prosperous Roman Catholic family, a dangerous thing at a time when anti-Catholic sentiment was common in England and the practice of Catholicism was illegal. He gave up Catholic faith and entered the Anglican Church. Soon he became Dean of St. Paul's Cathedral. The three stages of Donne's poetry are not necessarily chronological, but an easy way to categorize his works. Donne as a young man was a misogynistic, a cynical persona in his early poetry. Donne as a married lover was inspired by a Neoplatonic ideal of transcendent love. Donne as the Dean of St. Paul's Cathedral wrote religious poetry and prose, holy sonnets, and meditations. What does metaphysical poetry mean? The word meta means beyond, so the literal translation of metaphysical is beyond the natural. Basically, metaphysics deals with questions that cannot be explained by science. It questions the nature of reality in a philosophical way. So, what's metaphysical poetry? The poems classified in this group share common characteristics. They are all highly intellectualized, use rather strange imagery, use frequent paradox, contain extremely complicated thought, wit, and argument. Metaphysical poetry is a classification of poetry, not a genre. With a rebellious spirit, the metaphysical poets tried to break away from the conventional fashion of the Elizabethan love poetry. The diction, that is, the style, is simple and echoes the words and expressions of common speech. The imagery is taken from the actual life. The form is frequently that of an argument with the poet's beloved, or with God, or with himself. What is a metaphysical conceit? In Donne's day, conceit simply meant idea. A metaphysical conceit is a combination of heterogeneous, very different ideas linked together by violence, God and physical violence in Batter My Heart. Paradox is an apparently self-contradictory statement or circumstance that proves true upon reflection or when examined in another light. Argumentative, syllogistic form. Donne's poetry involves a certain kind of argument, sometimes in rigid syllogistic form. He seems to be speaking to a fictional hearer, raising the topic and trying to persuade him. Note the frequent use of the imperative form, go, catch a falling star, tell me, in song. Songs and sonnets. We do not know for sure when John Donne wrote his love poetry, because although it circulated in manuscripts during his lifetime, it was not published until 2 years after his death in the collection Songs and Sonnets. Song. The poet argues that it is impossible to find a woman who is both beautiful and honest. Nowhere lives a woman true and fair. To demonstrate just how impossible it is to find such a woman, Donne lists a number of unusual tasks that are impossible to complete. Go and catch a falling star, tell him where time goes, teach him to hear mermaids singing. The argument is that you are more likely to achieve any one of these impossible tasks than find a woman true and fair. In the second stanza, the poem imagines someone with special powers, the ability to see invisible things and read people's minds, traveling the world for 10,000 days and nights. Donne claims that such a person will see many strange and wonderful things on their travels and will have many tales to tell, but they will not have found a woman true and fair. If the traveler does find such a woman, she is to tell the poet, and the poet would be pleased to make the journey to see her. Such pilgrimage was sweet. But immediately she says she would not travel to see her even if she lived as close as next door, because he is convinced even if she was true when the traveler found her, and while he wrote to inform Donne, she will have been dishonest before the poet can count to 3. Themes and motifs. Beauty and virtue. Donne states that it's impossible for a woman to be both beautiful and trustworthy. Beautiful women, by their nature, are false, and even if they appear to be honest, it is only a matter of time before their true nature is revealed. Language. The poet uses a cynical and disillusioned tone with its doubts about the possibility of ever finding a woman who is genuine and trustworthy. The objects mentioned in the opening stanza appear to correspond with the treachery and beauty that the poet sees in women. The word falling in the opening lines suggests loss of faith in perfect love. The star, which Donne associates elsewhere with spiritual love, is dropping from the heavens. The word falling also calls to mind the biblical fall of man. The Bible tells how man fell from grace with God when Adam was persuaded by Eve to eat the apple from the tree of knowledge. Mentions of the devil's foot suggests evil and treachery, as does the reference to mermaid singing. Mermaids are traditionally presented as beautiful creatures who use their charms to seduce men and destroy them. Holy Sonnets. Donne's 19 emotional holy sonnets were composed from about 1607 to 1619 and published posthumously. Holy Sonnet 10. Death, be not proud. The speaker starts talking directly to Death, whom she treats as a person. She tells Death not to be so proud, because he's really not as scary or powerful as most people think. Donne uses the imperative form once again. The speaker starts talking in contradictions, saying that people don't really die when they meet death. Then she compares death to rest and sleep, 2 things that are not scary at all. Moreover, she calls death a slave and accuses him of hanging out with poison, war, and sickness. Besides, we don't need death. The speaker can just take drugs and it will have the same effect, that is, falling asleep. So death is just a short sleep, after which a good Christian will wake up and find himself in eternity. Once this happens, it will seem like death has died. Holy Sonnet 14. Butter my heart. The poet prays to God in his threefold capacity as the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, to butter his heart and reshape it. He is sunk in sin, and soft persuasion is not gonna work on him. God should overthrow the poet and bend his force to break, blow, and make him new and free from sin. He is like an usurped town, whose duty is to serve God, but he is occupied by the devil. He labors to let God enter into his body, that is, town, but it turns out a vain effort. Reason has surrendered to the devil. I love you, says the poet, but she's engaged to God's enemy. He wishes divorce to untie or break the knot. He requests God to imprison him and never let him free. Paradoxically, that would be the only way for him to be really free. He would be purified if God ravishes him. That is the strongest image Donne uses: God ravishing, raping, using physical violence on him. The poet is aware of man's sinful life, but also of God's infinite greatness. Meditation 17. No Man is an Island, from which Hemingway took the title for his 1941 novel For Whom the Bell Tolls. The bell that is ringing and announcing someone's approaching death might be for someone who hears it, but is so sick that he does not realize the bell is announcing his death. But even if the bell is not ringing for me specifically, because the church is universal and we are all connected through the church from birth to death, then when anything happens to another, I am part of that experience. Each life is a page in a book written by God, but death does not mean that God tears out the page and separates it from the other pages. Instead, God translates that page into a new language, using tools of translation like war, illness, age, and corporal punishment. Death is merely a transformation into a new language, and we all will be translated. In the end, God will take our lives, like leaves in a book, and bind them into one, and we shall exist as one. Because we all share the same fate, the bell that rings for one really rings for us all, for everybody. But it is especially relevant to me, for I have been closer to death because of my illness. No one lives in complete isolation from another. We have a collective bond because we are all part of humanity, and we all share in the same fate. We should never ask who the funeral bell is ringing for, because in reality, it is always ringing for us.